Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for November 21st through 27th. This week I read 3 books, I watched 3 shows, I watched 2 movies, and I listened to 1 book. We're in this slightly different location because this is honestly the best I could do today. The only good location with good lighting right now has a computer right under the lighting that is exporting. You can probably even hear it from here. It's very loud, but there's no way I could put my camera right there. I just couldn't do it, so you're gonna have to deal with this. First this week I finished Iron Widow. This is a book that if you have been watching BookTube recently, you probably don't need me to describe to you because it is very popular right now, and for good reason. I also didn't realize that this was the start of a series, so you should know that going into it because you're going to want the next book immediately, and it's not out yet, so that's a problem. This book is loosely based on Chinese history and mythology, and it has to do with this futuristic world where there are these large mecha robots that are being used to defend this one section of what we would call China. It has a different name in the book, I just can't think of what it is right now. However, the way that these robots work is that you have to have a man and a woman in them at all times. They have a psychic connection, and usually the man ends up draining the life force of the woman to use the robot, which means that the women end up dying more often than not. This is obviously a shitty system, and our main character's sister was actually one of these concubines, because of course that's what they call them, who was actually killed by one of these pilots, so she decides to deliberately become one of his concubines so she can kill him, and then it goes from there. This book was excellent, I highly recommend it, and I am very much looking forward to the next book because I have questions based on that ending. The next book I read was a children's nonfiction book called An Octopus Has Deadly Spit. This was a book about octopi and how they're really cool and some interesting facts about them, and for that it was pretty good. There were a couple of things in it where I was wondering why would you put this in a kid's book, such as there were cartoons every once in a while, and one of them was very fat-shamey, so I was wondering about that. And it turns out that this is just going to be the video where there's going to be lots of extra sounds, because if you couldn't already hear the rain sounds, now there's shower sounds and exporting sounds. Overall, this was fun because octopuses are really cool. It was a nice quick read, and I liked it for that. This week I also read The Death of an Owl. This is something I picked up on a whim for a reading vlog that will be coming up very, very soon for Library Scavenger Hunt, and it was not my cup of tea. This book was paced really strangely, so the first section of the book covered anywhere from I think 1981, and then it time jumps to 2010, and we get to know a bunch of stuff between then and 10, but there was no reason for the first section of the book to exist. Ultimately, once you get past all of the preamble backstory of the first section of the book, this is about a man who is working as kind of a political consultant for this guy who would eventually like to be the Prime Minister of the UK, and they were college friends, sort of. They were acquaintances more than anything, and one night when they're going to this guy's country estate, he hits an owl, and that sucks because obviously you don't want the owl to be hurt, but instead of taking the owl to a vet to get the wing pinned, he just bashes the owl's brains out. This is problematic on a few levels because 1, it was very violent and very disturbing. 2, the owl probably was going to be fine if you just got it medical attention, and 3, he's on a committee that makes it illegal to kill an owl because they are a protected species. And then from there he goes on to lie about it and try to drag our main character into it and say that it was his fault that he killed the owl, and it's a whole big thing. This, I really didn't care. I honestly couldn't bring myself to care too much about this. All of the people in this situation start getting kind of haunted by owls, and if that were done better, maybe I would care. The most interesting thing about this book is how a lot of it was written by one author, and then he died, and then his son finished it. So going into it, having read the author's note ahead of time, I was like, this is very interesting, and I'm excited to see what happened with this book. That was the last book his dad was going to write, and he stopped kind of halfway through type of thing, but that's a more interesting story than this was. On to the shows I watched this week, the first one being Station 19. I mentioned last week that I wanted to restart this one because I previously had seen the first season and I wanted to continue from there. I watched the entire first season and then 11 episodes into the second season, so I'm doing a very good job of getting through it. I really like this show. If you don't know about it, it's a spin-off of Grey's Anatomy, but it takes place at a fire station in Seattle as opposed to a hospital. There's character crossover between the 2 shows, and overall it's just introducing me to this brand new family of people who work together and all of the shenanigans that go down. It is another one of those shows where a lot of people are in peril all the time because that's the job that they have, but then also sometimes the characters are in peril. So I watched the entire first season. The season ends on a very big cliffhanger cliffhanger, so it was nice to finally get that resolved, because when I originally watched the first season, I think it was like 3 years ago, so it's good to know what happened in that situation. I'm very much looking forward to continuing through this series. This week I also stayed current on Drag Race UK. This was the finale, and I wouldn't have put that as my winner, is all I can really say. Like, good for her that she won, but I didn't think that it was merited. Yeah, I kind of thought that the person that won would be our third placer, and that wasn't the case, and I don't know how to feel about it. As for Canada's Drag Race, this week we did a roast. It's interesting how these things are kind of staggered 1 week off from each other. So UK last week we did a roast, and then this week in Canada they did a roast, so I'm sure that somebody scheduled it like that because it's happened a couple of times throughout these seasons. A roast is always some fun times. Writing jokes is really difficult, especially when the jokes are supposed to be mean but not too mean, so it is always a formidable challenge, and it was ultimately entertaining to watch, although there were some like crash and burn type of moments. This week we purposely watched a Lifetime movie called The Christmas Setup, specifically because the mother in it is played by Fran Drescher, and my roommates have been watching The Nanny, so they just basically watched all of that. And then I watched a really interesting video about Fran Drescher from Matt Baum, who I will try to remember to link down below. But because of that, I learned about this movie, and the premise of the movie is this guy is a lawyer in, I believe, New York, and he goes home for the Christmas season, and his mom, played by Fran Drescher, is basically trying to set him up with this guy in town who he actually used to have a crush on. The guy, back when they were in high school, was a couple of years ahead of him, but he was out and our main character wasn't, and he had a crush on this guy, and it's called The Christmas Setup because of this situation, and it's really cute. It's very hokey. It's not super well written, but it's very, very cute. And I realized before we even watched the movie that the two actors that play the son and the love interest are actually married in real life, which makes it adorable. This week we also watched We're the Millers, which is a movie I had never heard of before, and it's about this guy who is just a low-time drug dealer. He deals some pot or whatever, and then his stash is stolen by some kids, and his boss gets mad at him and basically says, well, okay, you're gonna have to go down to Mexico, pick up this shipment, and drive it back across the border, and then, you know, your debts are repaid. And he's like, well, if I just go by myself, that's gonna be really suspicious. So he basically pays this kid that lives in his building, this homeless girl, and this woman who lives in his building to be his pretend family so they can get across the border unscathed. The most fun part about this situation is that woman is played by Jennifer Aniston, and her job in the movie is actually a stripper, and my god, if I could look that good anytime, let alone when I'm whatever age Jennifer Aniston is, just my god. I also enjoy that at a point in this they use stripping as a way to get away from some bad guys, which was fun. This also had some absolutely ridiculous situations in it, like some cringe, oh my god, I can't believe they put this in movie situations, but I think they more bordered on funny than like, oh my god, no, why did my eyes just have to see that? Additionally, Nick Offerman and Catherine Hahn play a couple in this, and their dynamic is hilarious, and their inclusion into the story is hilarious, so it is funny, but it is one of those comedies where sometimes the jokes seem like they're gonna go way too far, so know that going in if you ever plan to watch it. My audiobook this week was The Paris Library. This is a book about the American library in Paris, previous to and during the Second World War and Nazi occupation. We get a few different point of view characters. The first one is Odile. She is wanting to work at the library. She is native to France, but she speaks English, she's got her library degree, and she's interviewing to work at the library and ultimately does get a job there. In this timeline, we also get the perspective of Margaret, who I believe is English, but her husband has something to do with the government and he's like an attaché or something like that. So she's living in France and she doesn't really know anybody, and she ends up making friends with Odile in the library. The other timeline we have is in Montana in the 1980s, and that is a young girl who, as we meet her, her mother's health is failing, and she actually has this really big interest with her next door neighbor, who is this woman named Odile. Yes, it is the same woman. This had a lot of compelling points to it. It was beautifully written. I really wanted to know what happened to all of the characters we're introduced to, because obviously they are in a terrible, dire situation. And I really enjoyed that the author did a lot of research specifically about the library and what was happening during the Second World War, such as Jewish people were no longer allowed to go to the library because Nazi occupation, but the librarians were actually sneaking them books and those types of things. This ended up being incredibly heartfelt and heartwarming, and I very much enjoyed it. Obviously it's a bibliophilic book, so I was predisposed to enjoy it, but other than that aspect of it, it was still a very good book. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving me a comment but want to make sure that I know you're here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is down below, as well as a link to my PayPal and my Amazon wishlist in case you would like to buy me a book. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!